Okay, chapter 7.3, the unit circle. This is page 1. We are going to start by talking about a couple of special types of right triangles. That's going to help us build the unit circle a little better, okay? Or with a little more understanding. So let's zoom in here real quick. We are going to talk about an isosceles right triangle. When we talk about an isosceles right triangle, that means we've got two sides that are the same leg and one right angle. Okay, so the congruent sides, you'll see this little tick mark right here on the side. That means these two sides are the same length. Doesn't even matter if we know what those lengths are. It does tell us we have an isosceles right triangle, which gives us information about those angles. We know those angles then are 45 degrees each. That's helpful. Okay. We are going to label these two congruent sides A. They're the same size. Might as well call them the same thing. We're going to make our hypotenuse C. And so now we are going to take a look at the relationship between those. Keep in mind we use A and C so that we could plug in any number and we know that this relationship's going to hold. So Pythagorean theorem says we can square the lengths of the legs and add those together. We get the square of the hypotenuse. 1a squared plus 1a squared gives us 2a squared. That equals c squared. In order to solve for c, because we don't want c squared, we just want c, we are going to square root both sides. So our c equals, now I'm going to square root these two parts separately. The square root of a squared is a, that's helpful. The square root of 2 is not a perfect square, so we are going to leave it this way. Square root of 2 times a, and that equals our c, so our hypotenuse. Okay, so now we can go down and fill in a couple blanks that we have right here. It's not, I guess it is labeled as exercise 1 up at the top. So from this, we can conclude that the hypotenuse length is always the length of a leg multiplied by square root of 2. So if we have one of the three sides, keep in mind we're just talking about this isosceles right triangle right now, we can find the other two sides. So we write that ratio x to x, those are our two legs, to the square root of 2 times x. Notice the 2 is underneath that radical sign. The x is not. X is the length of the legs, and square root of 2 times x is the length of the hypotenuse. So let's see what that looks like here. Exercise 2a, we know that the side of one of my legs is 8. This other side is marked as the same length. So that's 8. We know that we multiply by the square root of 2 to get the hypotenuse. I can't combine the whole number part, the rational part, and the radical part, so we just write it this way, 8 times the square root of 2. Okay, and so now I'm going to change colors just so I can kind of separate these. It doesn't get too confusing. So let's take a look at B. This time we've got that the hypotenuse is 7 square roots of 2. So if we multiply by the square root of 2 to get the hypotenuse, we're going to divide by square root of 2 to find the leg, length of the leg. Okay, I'm going to do that work over here. I got 7 square roots of 2. I'm going to divide by the square root of 2. Square root of 2 over square root of 2 cancels. So I know that the length of each of the legs is 7. This one's marked as the same. So isosceles right triangle, both of those legs are the same length. Fairly straightforward. So let's go to C. This one looks a little different because we've got that square root of 2 part. You guys, this is still the leg. So we know that this other leg is the same length, 10 times the square root of 2. Again, we're going to do the same thing we did up top. We're going to multiply by square root of 2 to find the hypotenuse. And so we've got, I'm going to put it down here and then I'll move it up top. 10 square roots of 2 times the square root of 2 which is 10 times, I can multiply under the radical sign, however you want to think about it. 10 times the square root of 4. Square root of 4 is 2. 10 times 2 makes our hypotenuse 20. And our last one here, D. This time we're given the hypotenuse, 9 square roots of 6. We're going to do the same thing we did above. We're going to divide by square root of 2 for the leg. The same way that we can combine a product, a multiplication under the radical, we can also combine that division, that quotient. So I got 9 times the square root of 6 divided by 2, 9 square roots of 3, and that's it. Each of these legs is 9 times the square root of 3. You guys, I'm afraid that at some point the recording cut out. If you notice that, go ahead and shoot me an email and I can fill in the gaps for you.